He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Could you just introduce yourself for me?
My name is Dan.
And can you tell me about your little dog?
I have a little Jack Russell named Dorothy.
She's very cute.
She's cute, yeah.
What is Dorothy like?
She's very disobedient sometimes and sometimes very obedient. She loves chasing hedgehogs.
So intermittently sassy, maybe?
Yeah, very sassy.
Bit of attitude.
That's a good way to, yeah, definite attitude, yep.
Kia ora, nau mai haramai ki te ao hurihanga. Hello and welcome to Our Changing World. Ko Concannon tēnei. It's a nice spring evening, mild temperatures, a smattering of sun and light winds. I'm at Kettle Park, the green space behind the dunes of St. Clair Beach, where the good people of Ōtepoti Dunedin are out walking their dogs.
Hi, I'm Libby, and I'm here with my two dogs, Checkers and Maple.
Checkers and Maple?
Yeah.
Okay, which one is Checkers?
Checkers is the white one.
Yep.
And she's 6 years old, and she's a Spoodle, so that's Spaniel Poodle cross.
Yeah, she's beautiful. Look at her tight curls.
So tight, very poodle curls. And we've got Maple, who just barked, who is 1 year old, and she's also a Spoodle, but she's a miniature poodle version, so she's smaller.
Aotearoa, New Zealand is a pet-loving nation. According to a 2020 survey of just over 500 people by Companion Animals NZ, about a third of us own dogs. And 2/3 of those dog owners think of their four-legged friend as a family member.
My name's Hero. Kiki she's my sort of constant companion because I take her to work every day. I'm a builder, and so she has her spot in the van, and she sort of comes out at breaks and runs around. So yeah, she always keeps the atmosphere light, and it's always a nice sort of client interaction because everyone seems to like a small fluffy dog.
They love us and we love them. But are we taking good care of them? Could we do better? In this week's episode, I catch up with canine welfare expert Dr. Mia Cobb of the University of Melbourne to find out. Mia had a keen interest in animal behaviour from the start and did a double major science degree in zoology and psychology. Then she headed off on an OE for a year.
I'm a first-generation Australian. Both my parents come from elsewhere, and so I did some backpacking around England and Europe and India and Nepal, and came back with a huge credit card debt. And the first job that I was able to get was as an animal attendant at the RSPCA here in Victoria, at their largest shelter. And working there really gave me, I guess, a jump in the deep end of all the ways our relationships with animals can break down, and put a fire in my belly for advocating for animal welfare. And so that set me on the course that has ended up with me being here. Along the way, I spent 10 years managing the training kennels and vet clinic at Guide Dogs Victoria. And that led to some opportunities, learning more about the welfare of working dogs, and led to me starting a part-time PhD while I was still working in that role, exploring the welfare of dogs living in kennel facilities, and particularly working dogs, and the stresses that they face with their changes of environment and social structure, and how we can better support them.
Yeah, so a huge amount of your career has kind of been that practical side of working with dogs, whether in an animal shelter or training guide dogs. What kind of drove you to return to the research side?
Yeah, great question. I guess we had questions that we couldn't find the answers to. And I was really lucky at Guide Dogs. We had these young dogs that had been out in foster homes in the community for their first year of life, being really well socialised. And they would return to the kennel facility to undergo assessment and then their formal training period of around 6 months. And we saw a lot of these young dogs not coping very well with that transition from living in a family home, coming back to the kennels. They were getting quite stressed. And for some of them, it meant that they weren't successful in continuing into training and graduating as guide dogs. So we were really interested in how could we better support them through that transition, and, would playing more games with them or giving them more one-on-one time with staff or giving them access to toys or things to chew, or even odours to smell help perhaps them cope with that transition better. And when we turned to the science and had a look at it, no one had really sort of tested an enrichment program like that in that sort of setting. And I was lucky enough to have a supportive CEO in the organisation. He said, well, why don't you go and pursue further study and answer that question for all of us? And so that's what I did. But you're right, that practical grounding, having worked in those settings, really influences my research still and makes me really passionate about our research having practical applications and translating back to help dogs and people.
And do you have dogs yourself?
Yeah, that's an occupational hazard. I can't imagine a time in my life where I won't have dogs. I think having worked in the shelters and seen how many dogs need good homes, and every dog teaches me new lessons about how to live well with dogs and give them a good life. So yes, at the moment I have a 10-year-old, what we call a staghound here, which is basically a mix of sighthound breeds. He came from regional farming area, was probably bred to be a kangaroo hunting dog, but was picked up as a stray dog just walking down the street and ended up in a local pound and shelter system. He came to us when he was about 6 months of age. He's just turned 10 on the weekend. He's lovely. He looks like a Womble cross with a Muppet. He's a very big, grey, shaggy creature with long legs. His name is Rudy. And we also have a 4-year-old German short-haired pointer who was someone else's pandemic puppy that they took on as their first dog and just found to be far too active and too much for them to manage. And so we rehomed her into our family again when she was about 6 months of age. So we've had her for a few years now, and she's very, very energetic. Even considering that the breed is known to be active, she's extra. She'll kind of ping around off hard surfaces and parkour off the couch at 11 o'clock at night and then want to fall asleep draped across your shoulders. So, yeah.
Doggy parkour, that's such a good description.
I adopted Clay, the greyhound, about 2.5 years ago. So he's an ex-racing greyhound, and he is now a fully professional couch potato. And yeah, he's absolutely gorgeous and I love him so much.
You might recognise this voice. Ellen Rikers works as a producer on Our Changing World. And while maybe you hear greyhound and think active, extremely energetic dog, that's generally not the case.
Yeah, they do a lot of snoozing interspersed with, short zoomies. But it does depend on the individual dog, I've heard. Clay's pretty much a classic greyhound in that, yeah, he's very lazy but also likes to go for short bursts of speed.
Yeah, mostly when we have our Changing World meetings, Clay is somewhere in the background just like completely spaced out on the floor snoozing.
That is very true, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't contribute much, in fairness. He's not really pulling his weight on the show. I mean, if Clay could talk, he might have some great ideas for episodes. The importance of napping and good quality snacks, perhaps. But it's one of the tricky things, says Mia. We can't have a discussion with our pet.
With animal welfare science, we're always seeking to understand that lived experience of animals. And it's tricky because I can ask you, how's your day? And you'll answer, and it'll depend on, whether the clothes you're wearing are comfortable, whether the room you're in is a good temperature, when you last ate, whether you had a good catch up with friends last night. Those kind of things will all inform how you're feeling right now in the moment. With animals, we can't have that direct conversation, so we need to look at indicators using their behaviour, and sometimes we use physiology or the way we might ask research questions, perhaps by giving them choices and seeing what they choose, to get an idea of their welfare status.
What are some of those indicators that kind of let us know that they are happy, relaxed, that we're kind of on that positive side of welfare?
Yeah, people always say to me, if only my dog could talk. And in so many ways they are. We just need to really be attuned to looking at them. And dogs are incredible at reading us and our behaviour. And I think we can kind of turn the light back on them and try and return the favour. So every day dogs are showing us through their behaviour how they're feeling, and that can be things like tail position and whether it's wagging and whether it's up or down or tilted to the side. So we know that dogs tend to hold their tails to the right when they're feeling emotionally positive, and if they're feeling a little bit anxious or unsure, it's more likely to be curved around to the left. So they're the kind of things that you can look for. Also through their face, so looking at things like the ear position, if they're looking away, if they're licking their lips. The things that might suggest a dog's asking for more space would be if you can see the whites of the eyes, if it's turning its head away from you, if you see it yawn or lick its lips. They're all really sort of early signs that a dog's not comfortable and is seeking to have greater space away from you, or something else that might be causing it a bit of stress, which might be another person or a dog or a situation. And I think they're the things that sometimes we we miss. And so then dogs need to escalate their communication with us, and that's where we might see things like a growl or a snap or a bite. And the good signs that we can look for are nice, loose, floppy behaviour. Dogs can be very waggly through their bodies when they're relaxed. You'll see they have what we call soft eyes rather than that bit of white showing. Their mouth will be relaxed, and they'll willingly engage with you. So little things like letting a dog approach you rather than going to it can mean that you have a longer interaction with dogs as well. There's been some cool research that's shown that. And letting them choose to leave as well, so not forcing them to stay with you. Being mindful that we're people and we're primates, we're really touchy and we like to hug things and touch them. Dogs, not so much. So, whilst they might like to come up and lean on you or be patted, you can kind of stop after a few seconds and just check, is that what you want? And if they want to continue that interaction, if they want you to keep patting, they'll probably look to you or lean against you a bit more or put their head back up under your hand. And that's kind of almost like a consent test where they're saying, yes, please, I'd like more of that. But if they don't, or if they move away, then letting them do that is really respecting their choices and giving them more agency in their lives, which we know will lead to them feeling better.
So the agency is quite important. Are there other examples that you can give of ways that maybe we could give our dogs more agency at home?
Yeah, agency is this great topic, and I actually wrote about it last year with Kat Littlewood, who was at Massey University in New Zealand, looking at ways that we can give animals more opportunity or choices to make decisions that matter to them in their lives. And I think really easy ones that every day people can do at home with dogs is things like letting them sniff at that treat for as long as they like. Often if we're on a walk, we want to haul them along and do our quick walk, but actually letting them stop and sniff something. This is kind of might be their only half an hour out of the house or the backyard for the day. And it's their opportunity to catch up on all the local news by using their noses. So the P-mail or the tree mail, whatever you want to call it, is really important for them, and letting them take their time to do that. If you have the capacity to let them choose which way to go on walks as well, so kind of letting them take the lead and follow where they'd like to investigate can be great. There can be things like you can teach your dogs, if I offer you option A or B, what would you like? And they can choose. So we've seen this done with horses where they let horses indicate when they like their rugs on or off. And it doesn't take a lot of repetitions for animals to pick up on this. So you could show them, a dog lead or a ball perhaps, and each of those links to a different activity. And over time, the dog will learn, if I nuzzle that, I get this. If I nuzzle that, I get that. And so you can give them more options, I guess, to opt into interactions with you that they'd enjoy.
Clay also goes in for the classic tail wagging, says Ellen. But there's something else more specific that she's learned to look out for.
Greyhounds also do this thing called chattering, where if they're happy or content or excited, they chatter their teeth and their whole sort of bottom jaw quivers. And so I'll often have people come up to me and say, "Oh, is he cold?" And I say, "No, he's just happy," because he's standing there chattering away.
More and more, says Mia, this is where the field is going towards, looking out for signs of happy, not just the absence of sad.
So it's a really exciting thing that's come out of animal welfare science over, I guess, the last 20 years and more recently is that we're not just understanding pain and suffering in animals now, we're recognising the positive side of animal welfare. So understanding that things like comfort and social connection and things that bring pleasure are just as important to sentient animals as understanding those negative things. And we can really look past now just preventing pain and suffering to how can we provide those positive experiences for animals. And, that can be things like giving them choices in, if you've got the TV on really loud, making sure they've got access to go out if they'd like to have some space between them and that sound. But it can also be, making sure they've got the opportunity to interact with other dogs if that's what they really enjoy doing, or that they're not left alone for long periods of time if they have separation anxiety, or that you get them support with that. There's a framework that we use in science called the 5 domains of animal welfare that is a really clear way to help us understand how to assess and look for opportunities to improve the welfare of animals. That was actually developed by David Mellor out of Massey University in New Zealand, and it's been extended over time by other researchers from New Zealand like Nio Beausoleil and Kat Littlewood, and that's something that I use every day in my work, and that gives us a really structured way of looking at the positive and negative experiences as well as the physical provisions for animals. So we look at things like their nutrition, their environment, so where are they living and what do they have there. We look at their physical health and how that's being cared for. The really important, exciting one, which is kind of this agency area, is looking at their behavioural interactions, and that will be with their environment, with people and with other animals. And then we look across all those areas how they provide the mental experience that animals are having day to day. And so the positive and negatives across each of those other domains informs how an animal's feeling, or the indicators that we can look at about how it's feeling, and then that gives us an indication of its overall welfare status. So that model of considering it scientifically is a really useful tool for us to use when we're assessing animal welfare and also looking for opportunities to improve animal welfare.
You're obviously a dog person. I'm also a dog person.
Most of us are.
Yeah. I'm a dog auntie at the moment. When I was a kid, I had a puppy for very many years. He was just the best dog in the world. But now I'm a dog auntie to many different dogs. And it's just that like unconditional joy that, you know, when you show up and they're just like, oh my God, you're here, you're here, and now we can do things. And, you know, we feel that for our dogs and like enjoy their company. What do we know about that doggy joy and loyalty from science?
We're getting better at measuring it, is what I would say, and understanding it. So certainly we're at a point now where we've been able to look at things like brain activity in responses to people and photos of different emotions. We've been able to look at physiology and behaviour to understand that dogs do have really meaningful attachments to people. And in some ways it's been compared to the way a child attaches to a parent. So we can do the same kind of experiments that we do with children and their parents.
Can you talk me through some of those experiments? Like, how do we know that the dogs care about us?
Yeah, we want to know they love us. We've done it in different ways. So we've looked at things like hormones like oxytocin and seen that you know, they respond to being with us, and that's a real social cohesion, bonding kind of hormone. We've also looked at things like some researchers in other parts of the world have trained dogs to go into MRI machines while they're awake and sit very still and respond to different things. So they might show them a photo of their guardian or their person and then a photo of someone they don't know, and looked at the differences in brain activity, and we see responses that indicate, I guess, attachment the same way that we would see in people.
So it's kind of the same parts of the brain are lighting up.
Yeah, lighting up that indicate, you know, connection, social connection, or that's my person. Yeah, and they also have used that method to look at different emotions and things like that. So dogs reading us and our emotions quite well. There's been some cool research that's looked at what we ascribe as the guilty look in dogs and shown that actually, I mean, we can't say whether they feel guilty or not, but more often it appears they're just responding to our behavioural cues and giving us what are canine appeasing behaviours. So trying to de-escalate a situation because they can see the way that we're reacting. And over time, they might learn that certain behaviours from us mean certain consequences for them. And so they're trying to make up with us before we even escalate. Yeah.
One of the dogs that I'm a dog auntie to, I had left some treats in the side pocket of the driver's door and forgot about them. And then we stopped off at the shop and I went in. He was sitting in the passenger seat and I went in to
Did he take
get
care
the
of them for
groceries.
you? Yeah, helped you out so they didn't go off? Yeah.
When I came back, he was sitting in the driver's side and I was like, oh.
Yeah, well, some good friends of mine actually, Julie Hecht and Alexandra Horowitz, who are based over in the United States, did a really cool study design where basically they had people bring in their dogs into a room and then leave them with something that they would like to eat and tell them not to eat it and leave the room. And then they misinformed the owners that the dogs had eaten the treat when sometimes the dogs hadn't. and then looked at the owner behaviour going back into the room and whether that triggered this guilty look. And so even when dogs hadn't taken the treat, if owners thought they had, it was enough to promote this guilty look in the dogs. And so that really showed that it's us cueing that response behaviourally rather than the dogs having done something inherently not appropriate.
Oh, that's interesting. Because he did look guilty when I returned from the supermarket. But
Had
maybe
you
that was
already
'cause
worked
I had
out?
worked out.
Yeah. So you were probably already doing, oh, what's going on here? And he's like, I want to make peace with you. We're friends.
Yes, of course we're still friends, Rupert. Of course. But they're not just good at reading us. There's also some research that indicates dogs can measure the passing of time.
So I think probably one of the coolest studies has looked at exploring how dogs react when we return after a period of separation. How do dogs tell time? So one of the studies showed that they wag their tails harder upon reunion the longer you've been away. And so I think, that's really interesting because it's like, well, how do they know I've been gone for 5 hours, not just 10 minutes? And so when we think about dogs in the world, they're very smell-based. And we think what's happening is that as our odour evaporates, that's giving them an indication of time of how long we've been away. And so it's not just that feeling of, you've been away longer now. It's also because I can smell you less. And so when you return, I know it's been longer and therefore I can, wag my tail harder because I'm so pleased we're back together again.
Mia is just at the start of a canine welfare science fellowship. She's in the planning stage, figuring out which questions she'll tackle first. A lot of the research to date has focused on how dogs help us, whether it's through working roles or companionship. But she'll be looking at how we can help them live their best lives.
So I'm an interdisciplinary researcher. So as much as I'm interested in understanding the animal welfare experience through behaviour and physiology, I also look at human psychology and opportunities for behaviour change. And so I guess there are some problems like flat-faced dogs where we understand the canine side of that really well. We know that dogs like bulldogs and pugs and French bulldogs have a really tough time living in the body that we've bred them into. The shortened skull leads to a lot of breathing issues. They can have eye problems and skin problems as well. And basically, they tend to live very uncomfortable lives. What we haven't been able to work out yet is how we change people making the decisions that result in dogs living in those bodies. But my interests are far and wide. I'm really interested in emerging technologies and the roles they might play in helping dogs have more agency in their lives and how we can perhaps track their welfare as well. But yeah, I guess across all those things, I want to understand what dogs need to live a good life. I want to understand how people think about dogs and use both those things so that we can have a really positive, sustainable relationship between dogs and people as companions, as co-workers into the future.
You kind of started when you came back and were super broke, credit card bills. You started an SPCA, where I guess you see, kind of the best of dogs, but also the worst of possibly the, bad interactions between humans and dogs. Do those things stick for life with dogs?
I think, like us, there are certain experiences that will always stay with an individual. And that might be perhaps, your dog reacts differently when it sees someone wearing a certain item of clothing coming their way. And that's based on a bad experience they've had in their past. And yeah, I think there can be situations where dogs keep those memories with them for life and they shape them and are formative. There are certainly situations where that can be overcome through desensitization or counter-conditioning training where you actively try and work using high-value food rewards and not pushing things too quickly, I guess, to change that underlying emotional response that a dog's having to whatever is causing that response. My older dog, when he was younger, didn't like men with beards and hats. And so what I did was go out into public and find men with beards and hats and ask them just to give him pieces of chicken. And we would do that a couple of times with each person that we could find. And over time, that changed that underlying emotional response that he was having from, oh, that's scary, to, oh, great, here comes a new friend. And so we were able to overcome that, because he really surprised me initially. He would growl if, a man who had a beard and was wearing a hat approached us, which was not like him in relation to anyone else. So I can only assume that before we got him, he had some kind of negative experience that stayed with him.
Are there things that maybe people could avoid? Like, what are the things that we're doing that probably we shouldn't? I think you mentioned hugging earlier, and I am a doggy hugger.
Yeah.
And
It's true. A lot of dogs don't like being hugged. It's an inconvenient truth. They might like an ear rub or a chin scratch or a back rub, but they generally don't like having our arms wrapped around them. And you can kind of see them squish their eyes up and their mouths tighten up when people do it. My big dog will tolerate it, but because he's big and shaggy, people love him and want to, like, strangers will come up in the street and try and wrap their arms around him. And it's, sometimes advocating for your dog can be a really important thing to do by saying, oh, no, sorry, he doesn't like being hugged. Can you, just, give him a scratch under the chin instead, or just give him a little bit of space. But from a day-to-day, I think just recognising that we really manage our dogs' lives and control them so much. And unless we're giving them those opportunities to get outside or go and interact with other dogs or go to new places, I think in Melbourne, we were the most locked down city during COVID, and it gave us some really interesting insights into what it's like when you're not allowed to go where you want to go, when perhaps you would like to. And we had that for about 280 days here, where we weren't allowed to leave our homes for more than an hour at a time, couldn't travel more than 5 kilometres from home. And it was really tough. And I think that's a really good window into what it can be like being a companion animal. If you're not in a home where your owner or your guardian is taking you out regularly and to lots of different places. So I think just considering, what their day looks like from 4 paws, understanding that just because your dog might be sleeping on the couch all day doesn't mean it wouldn't perhaps like to do something else if it was given the opportunity. Looking for those easy things to make their day more interesting. So one of the things I do at home, instead of giving my dogs their meal just in a bowl, is I'll leave them inside and pop outside and scatter food in little piles around the yard, but where they not necessarily know where they are. And then they'll go out and use their noses to sniff and find those bits of food. And so that's a more engaging activity. It gives them something to do when I leave the house, and then they can settle down and have a sleep, but feel content and that they've done something with their brains and noses, importantly, as well.
And you have 2 doggies, so presumably they keep each other company. But are there many dogs that will experience a lot of loneliness? Like, are they super social?
Yeah, I think particularly young dogs that were purchased during COVID lockdowns, that was quite common all around the world. And now that a lot of workplaces are requiring people to go back to offices, I think that is a big kind of silent welfare issue. Dogs are highly social like us. They do really like hanging out with people or other dogs. And the fact that a lot of them are left alone for a long time, in isolation, isn't great for them. There are some dogs that prefer to be alone, so it's important to know your dog and not, think that they're going to be happier if they're, dropped off at doggy daycare with 12 other dogs for the day. They may hate that. So knowing your dog as an individual is really important. But just recognising that, getting out for a half-hour romp at the dog park before they're left alone for the day might make the difference in how they can manage that, because they've had social activity, they've been physical, and then they can enjoy resting while you're gone and perhaps go for another walk later on in the day.
It sounds like getting to know what your dog enjoys and doesn't enjoy is kind of a really key thing.
It is really important because they are individuals at the end of the day, and I think it would be lovely for me to say, here are the 5 golden rules every dog owner needs to provide for their dog to live its best life. But it's not that easy. I mean, it's a bit like us, and what we all find interesting is going to differ person to person, or what we enjoy doing is going to differ person to person. And whether we're extroverted or introverted, we've modelled personality in dogs as well. It's very similar to people. And so we know that, we have dogs that are more anxious or more neurotic and more personable and, enjoy social interaction than others do. So, knowing your dog and paying attention to those behavioural cues, if they're saying, yes, this is what I like, or actually, no, I'd rather not, that's how you can best support them to have a good life.
Ellen says Clay is nosy, loves people, and is a big treat guy. So much so that sometimes he'll wolf them down too quick and then end up coughing. And then there's only a few things in his dislike column.
He doesn't like some bigger dogs or some dog interactions he's not a fan of. He's kind of his own dog and likes to be in his own space and doing his own thing. He doesn't like the vacuum cleaner that much, but he's not afraid of it. But he's mostly just a really happy guy. There's not really many things he dislikes.
They can be big or small, sleek or fluffy. Maybe they love snacks or are toy obsessed. They can be super affectionate or like to do their own thing. Some work, some are athletes, others like to lounge. They are individuals with their own personalities, and they enrich our lives in many ways.
Every day they make me laugh with their antics and their companionship. I have 2 children as well who like playing with them and have their own relationships with each of the dogs. I think old dogs are some of the best people that you can have a relationship with. They're so rewarding and lovely. But the antics of young dogs will, always keep us laughing. Yeah, there's not a day that goes by that I'm not grateful for those interactions and those relationships. Yeah, I think they're the best.
It's unconditional companionship. He's there when I wake up in the morning and he's always happy to see me.
They keep us active, which is really good, but they just bring so much love as well. And you can see how much they want you and how much they adore you and how thankful they are that you're in their lives, which makes it even more kind of just lovely that, you have them as well.
She just makes me feel happy. I guess. She makes my life a bit better.
Thanks to Dr. Mia Cobb of the University of Melbourne, to Ellen Rikers, and to all the people who stopped mid-walkies to chat to me about their dogs. This episode was produced by me with help from Ellen and Liz Garton. Sound engineering is by Phil Bench, and it was recorded with the help of Otago Access Radio. We've got heaps of pictures of super cute dogs available up on the written article for this episode. Have a look for it on the main RNZ webpage, or you can find it at rnz.co.nz/news/Our Changing World. Tēnā koe I whakarongo mai. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Claire Concannon. Have a great week. Kia pai te wiki. Have you got something to say?
Yeah, that's easy. She'll check it as edible before she'll...
Nice, yeah. Give it a bit of a chomp. Why not?